The rhetoric surrounding Europe's biggest nuclear strength plant, close to the front line in Ukraine, is becoming increasingly more alarming, with global figures warning of the danger of a major accident. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres believes manageable injury to the Zaporizhzhia plant ought to be suicide, and Turkey's president has stated, "No one wants another Chernobyl, the world's worst nuclear accident." When Ukraine was below Soviet rule, Russia seized the website online on the left financial institution of the river Dnieper at the begin of its struggle. However, this month the two aspects have accused each different of over and over shelling it. Each claims the other is planning a provocation. Ukraine says a Russian film crew has already staged an attack to blame on Kyiv. Russian defense officials have produced a map displaying how a radioactive cloud may unfold from the plant from Ukraine to neighboring countries, along with Hungary, Poland and Slovakia. What, then, is the chance to this nuclear plant, which houses 6 reactors, and is Europe dealing with a Fukushima-type meltdown? "I would not be too worried," says Mark Wenman, head of the Center for Doctoral Training in Nuclear Energy Futures. Zaporizhzhia was once constructed in the 1980s, which is noticeably modern. It has a solid containment building. It's 1.75 meters (5.75 feet) thick, of closely bolstered concrete on a seismic mattress to withstand earthquakes, and it takes a hell of a lot to breach that. He rejects comparisons with both Chernobyl in 1986 or Fukushima in 2011. Chernobyl had serious plan flaws. He explains, while at Fukushima the diesel generators had been flooded, which he believes would now not show up in Ukraine as the mills are in the containment building. Much of the nervousness has been about the plant coming beneath fire from artillery shells or rockets. Ukraine has accused Russian forces of the use of it as a defend from which to hearth on nearby cities. Russia denies that is the case. That may additionally not be the largest risk. After 9/11, nuclear vegetation had been examined for conceivable attacks involving giant airliners and found to be largely safe. A probably greater serious hazard could come if the power supply to the nuclear reactors and backup generators was lost and led to a loss of coolant. With no electrical energy to strengthen the pumps around the warm reactor core, the gas would begin to melt. Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, who heads Russia's nuclear safety corps, said the plant's support systems had already been broken via shelling, and that sort of pump and generator failure could lead to the reactor core overheating and the plant's amenities being destroyed. That wouldn't be as serious as Chernobyl, but it may want to nevertheless lead to a release of radioactivity, and that relies upon which way the wind's blowing, says Claire Corkhill, professor of nuclear cloth degradation at the University of Sheffield. For her, the chance of something going incorrect is actual, and Russia would be just as a great deal at danger as Central Europe. The UN's Atomic Energy Authority, the IAEA, warns of a very real threat of nuclear disaster, and has asked to be allowed get right of entry to the website as quickly as possible. The UN Secretary customary has known as on Russia to pull its troops out and demilitarize the place with a safe perimeter. Russia has refused, arguing that would make the plant greater vulnerable. Ukraine's nuclear organization says 3 of the 4 strength transmission traces linking the plant to Ukraine have already been damaged by way of rocket fire. If the closing supply of energy is additionally broken, the corporation believes nuclear fuel will begin melting, resulting in a launch of radioactive substances to the environment, and diesel mills will no longer supply a long-term solution. But Professor Itok Tisel, chair of nuclear engineering at the University of Ljubljana in Slovenia, believes the hazard of a principal radioactive incident is minimal as only 2 of the 6 reactors are now operating. From the standpoint of European residents, there's no reason to worry. He says, the different 4 are in a nation of bloodless shutdown, so the quantity of electricity wished to cool the reactors is smaller. Mark Wenman is full of praise for the Ukrainian team of workers at the plant who decreased the wide variety of reactors in operation. That potential that even though the radioactive merchandise proceed to be radioactive, the so-called decay heat after a shutdown decays exponentially with time. Provided the diesel turbines are in good shape, even if they lost electrical energy from the grid, they must be in a position to cool the reactor, he says. Another major protection worry should come from the spent fuel at Zaporizhzhia. Once the fuel is completed, the waste is cooled in spent fuel swimming pools, and then moved to dry cask storage. If these were to be damaged, there would be a release of radioactivity. However, it would not be somewhere near as serious as the loss of coolant, says Professor Corkhill, and Itok Tisel believes any launch of would be so small as to be negligible. At the coronary heart of this disaster are the plant's original staff, working below Russian occupation and pretty, in all likelihood under a fantastic deal of stress. They have complained of the plant coming below continuous assault. However, warn the actual risk of disaster would emerge if Russia shut the entire plant down. So it could disconnect the grant from Ukraine and reconnect it as a substitute to Russian-occupied Crimea. Dr. Wenman believes it is the human component that represents the largest chance of a nuclear accident, whether or not because of chronic fatigue or stress, and that violates all the protection principles. If something were to go wrong, they would want to be on top form, and one can imagine they are not, says Claire Corkhill. The head of the IAEA, Raphael Grossi, appealed for the body of workers to be left to elevate out their obligations without threats or pressure. A letter signed by using dozens of personnel at the plant on Thursday, known as on the international community to cease and think. We can professionally control nuclear fission, it said, but we are helpless in the face of people's irresponsibility and madness. Exercise. Preparing for the worst at Ukraine nuclear plant Crimea. Fight back having psychological impact on Russia analysis. Predicting Russia's subsequent step in Ukraine. Read more. Full insurance.